Great. We want to welcome you all here. In case you don't know who I am, I'm Nancy Wilson, and by trade, I am an au pair coordinator, and also I manage member experience for a health club in Westport called Tap Strength. But my real passion is anything that has to do with having an experience. So travel, theater going, concert going. If any of you were at Cyndi Lauper last night, it was excellent. Working out, and of course, reading books. So during the pandemic, I started a Facebook group called Westport CT Book Chat and Swap. And my goal was to find other avid readers who wanted to talk about books that they enjoyed, and also to be able to share titles back and forth so that we weren't all buying 5 million books during the pandemic, and we could share them amongst neighbors. I recruited my friend Jennifer Blankfein because she's an excellent blog writer. If you guys don't subscribe to Book Nation by Jen, you should. And she does a club and she has authors on. So I had read Lessons in Chemistry and I really loved it. And I was on a book chat with Bonnie. And I said to myself, you know what? I'm just going to send her a message on Instagram and maybe she'll respond and she can be the first author for our Westport CT Book Chat and Swap with Jen's Book Nation by Jen. She graciously accepted, and Jennifer graciously said that she would do the interview since I don't have the experience that Jen does. And that's where we ended up today. So we're so happy to have all of you on. And if you want to put any comments in the chat, if you guys have any questions for Bonnie, Jen's done an excellent job of coming up with many questions. But if there's something that has not been addressed, I'm happy to bring up your question. And if you want to also pop in the chat and tell us where you're all from, because you're not all from Westport, that would be great as well. So with no further ado, Jen and Bonnie, you guys can take it from here.
Great. Thank you so much, Nancy. Thank you for asking me to interview Bonnie. And Bonnie, thank you so much for being here all the way from London, right? Which is very exciting. It's probably close to your bedtime. But thank you for staying awake for us. That's great. So I wrote a little note in the chat. If you are here and you haven't signed up for Book Nation by Jen, the link is in the chat so that you know where to go to keep up to date on book reviews and book events. And so let's begin with Bonnie. I think what I'll do, Bonnie, is read your bio. We'll start with that and then we'll get into it all. So Bonnie Garmus is a copywriter and creative director who has worked widely in the fields of technology, medicine, and education. She's an open water swimmer, a rower, a mother to 2 pretty amazing daughters. Born in California and most recently from Seattle, she currently lives in London with her husband and her dog, 99. So it seems like there are some parts of you that have seeped into the main character of Elizabeth Zott, but we'll get to that in a minute. Let's start with you. Where in London do you live and how long have you been there?
Well, we've been in London about 5 years now. I live in South Kensington, but our landlord is kicking us out. So we should be moving somewhere else really soon.
You're staying there?
Yeah, we're going to stay here. I need to, but I think we'll just probably move a little bit further outside of London.
Okay, nice. Is your book, Lessons in Chemistry, getting as much attention there as it is here? Because here, everyone's talking about it, which you know, and it was, you know, the chosen book for all different groups. What's it like there?
It's really been a runaway bestseller here. It's been astounding. I had no idea any of this would happen. But yeah, it's been on the bestseller list here for 23 weeks and in Germany and other nations as well. So who knew that this would happen? Not me and not my agent. So it's been a huge shock for all of us.
What a nice surprise, right? For
yeah, very nice surprise.
Debut novel. That's pretty unusual, right?
Yeah, it is. It's definitely unusual. Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about your career and what you have been doing up until this book came out?
Yeah, well, so I think of myself primarily as a copywriter. As you progress as a copywriter, you naturally, usually most creative directors were copywriters. So I also did creative direction, but I always thought of myself as the writer first. And so I've been writing for various companies for a long time, a lot in technology, especially the really big technology companies, doing campaigns, speeches, videos, and things like that. And then I also worked in the fields, I had my own company, and so I never worked within an agency, because if you do, you can't ever say no to a project. But if you're on your own, you can always say no. And so I just built my business doing very selective projects for people, and then it grew really, really big. And it was really great. But after the book came out, I was able to let that go, and that was a great day. So anyway, yeah, so that's what I've been doing. I've been, we moved around a lot. So my business is very portable. As a writer, unfortunately, your business is always portable. So you never have an excuse to say, no, I can't do it.
Right.
Anyway.
And with this book, how long did it take you to write it, and how long did it take you to get it published?
It took me about 5 years to write it. And then my agent saw it, and very surprisingly, she signed it without me finishing it. And it was really exciting because my agent is Felicity Blunt, and she is what we call a super agent. And I never expected someone like that to like what I was writing. And in fact, when she approached me about it, I was positive that she'd mix me up with another writer. And so I was waiting, listening to her talk to me and thinking pretty soon she's going to realize she is the wrong person. And then she finally mentioned something about Elizabeth Zott. And I actually said to her, oh my God, thank God. I thought you were going to, say some other character. But yeah, we met, and she just said, no, I love this. And I'm going to sign you. And I don't do this. We do not sign people before they're done, but I'm going to sign you. So she did. And here I am.
Wow, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten a lot of rejections from other agents on another book that I'd written that was too long for agents to read. And so I really couldn't get anyone to read that one. And this one, I said, this one's written in the same way as the other one, and she's never read the other one. No one will read it. So it's really strange, but she said, no, I like this one. I like where it's going. And then we worked on it for about a year. And it's kind of funny when you work with an agent, what they do is they read through it and they send you some comments, but it'll take them, they take your manuscript, they don't write you back for 5 months. And so you go, oh my God. And then it just turns out, no, they just have 1 million manuscripts they're reading, yours is just one of them. And it doesn't, when you get an agent, it doesn't mean that your book is actually going to be published. Most of my friends with agents, their books are not published, or their agents have fired them. So it's a very difficult, it's a lot rockier road than people might imagine. So for me to be able to get this agent and then have her be able to sell it at Frankfurt Book Fair was sort of the dream, but then it just kept escalating. So we're both very shocked by the whole thing.
It's very humbling, and it was lucky that you had a career on the side. Because
well, that's it, because I was not about to quit my job. Less than I think it's less than 1% of writers in the world make over minimum wage writing books. And I think most people think of, James Patterson or, very, very famous writers, and they do very, very well, but most writers don't. And that's just the way the business is. It's pretty harsh out there. So even if you do get an agent, the chances of you being dumped by that agent are pretty high if you do not produce something that they feel they can sell.
Right. Well, were you in a writing group before that? Did you have peers that helped you with the different drafts leading up to that, or no?
I have friends who have read a little snippet, but I don't like writing groups very much because it's kind of like the blind leading the blind. When you're writing, because I have so much experience writing in real life, writing speeches especially is storytelling, and writing campaigns is very much storytelling. And because I had that experience, when you get other people in a group and they're trying to give you their best advice, it may not be helpful at all for what you're doing. And if you're doing something that's really different, they might go, no, you're not following the 10 rules of novel writing or whatever. And I knew I wouldn't be following those rules. And luckily, when I met Felicity, she was really glad I wasn't following the rules. So you just have to kind of be careful when you're in those groups. I think those groups are great for moral support, but they're not always so great for advice you can take to the bank.
It's so interesting because I wonder if you would have said that same answer if you were in your 20s without your experience, right? It's very different.
Yeah, exactly. No, you're exactly right. And I think it really does. You've really got to know what you're doing, and you have to be confident in what you're writing. And I think for most writers, this is a very dicey industry, and it's hard to maintain that confidence in your writing. And so if you suddenly are in a writing group, and I have lots of writing friends, and you know what? We never exchange our manuscripts. We're like, we say, did you get anything written today? It's like a support group, but it's not like, you can't use, another point of view on this page. It's never like that.
Yeah, it's personal. It's very personal.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right, so let's talk about Elizabeth Zott. She was a feminist before her time, really.
Mm-hmm.
And she was brilliant, and she was persistent, and she was beautiful. And she said what she meant, and she made life decisions based on real evidence. How did you come up with her?
Well, she'd been a minor character in a novel, this one novel that I started a long time ago, and I'd never finished that one. But she came zooming back to me one day. I'd had a really bad day at work, and I'd been in a meeting. I was the only woman in the meeting, and I just finished presenting my ideas for a campaign, and no one really said anything. And then a vice president who was in that meeting ended up saying, hey, I know what we should do. We should do X. And it was exactly what I had just said. And I had PowerPoint slides up at the time. And no one gave me any credit for any of this work I had done. And I was really frustrated. And I said, I'm sitting here. I just said all of this stuff. That these are my ideas. And not a single person in that room supported me that day. And I left that meeting. I was really mad. And I went back to my desk. And instead of working, I wrote the first chapter of Lessons in Chemistry, which, really paid off in the long run. But, I think that day I had reached my limit of misogyny at work, of being talked over or talked down to, or whatever it was. I was in a boys' club that day, and I had just had my fill of it that day. And I was tired of brains being wasted. And on that day, my brain. And so in frustration, I sat down and wrote that first chapter. And then I just had to follow it for, 5 more years.
Wow. Did the people that were in that meeting, did you send them copies of the book?
Unbelievably. One of the, I had a couple friends in that meeting. I think that was the hard part for me. Some of these men I'd worked with quite a while. And I was at a reading in Seattle, and one of them showed up to Seattle to my reading. And he came up to me and he goes, I got to say, I've heard you talk about that day, and I know what day that was because I was there. And he said, I owe you an apology. And also, I just want to say, thank you for not naming us individually in your book.
Wow. Well, that's amazing that he took responsibility. That was worthwhile.
It was, I think as he said, I have girls. And now the idea that my kids would be treated that way in a meeting, I'm so embarrassed. But actually, I didn't base anyone in the book on a real person, except for the dog. I wouldn't have done that. It's, too dicey to do that.
Right. That's right. Now, do you hear from a lot of readers saying that they have experienced similar things to what your character experienced? I mean, are you getting feedback about sexism at work?
Yeah, I mean, the book's being published all over the world, and I can say, sadly, that women all over the world are saying that the labs that they work in today are the same lab that I'm describing in the book. I've had probably hundreds of direct messages, right, within the last 2 months from women chemists all over the world who have said, you know, there are more of us, but we still don't have a voice. There, you know, our names are still left off of papers, and we have trouble getting supplies. So I think the most common response I get from women is thank you, and also we're still in this rut, and how are we going to get out of it? And so I say that, well, the main thing is to make sure a man reads this book, because I think a lot of men really don't see what's going on until they can read about it in maybe a more approachable, human and humorous way. And then they go, oh yeah, I think I've done that. And I got a direct message from a man who said, I'm writing to tell you that I was naughty. And after I read your book, I'm so ashamed. And so I'm reformed.
Okay.
Yeah, there's one.
That's one. It's interesting because even Calvin, as great as he was, he didn't realize it was going on either.
I think I think a lot of men don't know. I think that they, they don't notice it because it's ingrained in our system. And so, yeah, Calvin did not recognize that. It never hit him. Why wouldn't it be 50% women? He never considered why that would be that way. So, yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So you made Elizabeth a chemist. Why a chemist, and what kind of research did you do to know about chemistry? Or did you already know about it?
I knew, no, unfortunately. I knew that I wanted her to be a chemist because I knew that there wouldn't be very many women in the field at that time. And I also knew that in order for her to be on TV, she would have to have some sort of home ec show. And that had to be, I thought, cooking, because chemistry actually is cooking and cooking actually is chemistry. It's just a fact. And so that, to me, that felt perfect right up until the moment that I had to order the chemistry book off of eBay, because I had to base it on 50s chemistry and realized that I needed to teach myself 50s chemistry, which was a little bit of an uphill battle, but I did it. And I also used a children's chemistry experiment book that is banned because so many kids in the 50s blew themselves up.
Ah, that I didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I did take chemistry, but I don't remember about blowing people up. Anyway, so she's hosting this cooking show now. Are you interested in cooking? Do you know a lot about cooking?
I don't like to cook at all. As a copywriter, you never ever write what you know. And so writing things that I didn't know in this book is second nature to a copywriter. It's fine. Although I have to admit the chemistry was a little bit more challenging than I had hoped it would be. But no, I don't really like to cook, but I love people who do cook. And I think that they are underestimated so often for what they've just accomplished, because if you're a good cook, you're a good chemist. You're actually a scientist, and you've done a really, really good job, because not all people cook well. And I know because I'm one of them.
Have you seen the Julia Child shows?
No. And that's the thing. I don't watch cooking shows. And I've been in contact with so many chefs, and they've all been so gracious, and a couple of them have said, I love it that you don't like to cook. I love it that you recognize that what we do is hard and that it is a science. And my hat's off to those people, but no, I don't watch cooking shows. And my husband showed me a very old episode of Julia Child that I'd never seen her. And in a way, I didn't want to watch cooking shows to write the show, because I didn't want to mimic anything that had been out there.
Right. But it is kind of similar. If you now watch the Julia Child from way back when, it's fun to watch how she talks about cooking,
Yeah. I only saw one episode. I think that it's different enough because Elizabeth Zott is talking about society when she's cooking. She's talking about, a cultural war that we're in. And she's talking about things that you do not mention while you're cooking. So she's really stirring the pot. both politically and emotionally for a lot of the viewers.
And
she's not
literally.
just, yeah, right. She's not just cooking. She is, she's teaching them, but it's a lot more than cooking.
Right. It would be fun to have her recipes someday in your spare
Yeah,
time.
well, yeah, my agent loves to cook and she keeps bringing that up. So we'll see.
Yeah, even if it's just on your website, right? Doesn't have to publish, but just here and there, Elizabeth's recipes would be kind of fun.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about feminism. Elizabeth wants to make history doing research, but she loses her job as an unwed mother. And even though she's smart, it's her beauty that gets her this opportunity to host the cooking show. And the reason is because the men are using her for ratings. How is it to write about that? What was that like?
I had a friend way back when who was really beautiful, and all the women were really jealous of her at work because they thought that she had it made. In fact, her life was so much harder because no man took her seriously because she was that attractive. They treated her like she was an idiot because she was so attractive. And so when I was writing Elizabeth Zott as kind of a normal, plain woman. And then I went, you know what? I'm going to make her life a living hell and make her attractive, because in order for her to be on TV, she'd have to be attractive, especially because she's not like Julia Child. She's there to teach chemistry. She's not going to be entertaining the housewives in a very specific way that her producers wanted her to do. But they were just hiring her for her looks. But in the lab, when you're that attractive, at least from what I observed from my friend, no one takes you seriously.
Yeah, I know. I remember there's a part in the book where the other chemists are watching Elizabeth with Calvin, and they're wondering what she's still doing here. He seems to like her, and she doesn't need to be in the office anymore. She's accomplished what she came for, which was to be with him. And of course, that wasn't really the case. So nobody really understood her.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that was, for me, the key between Elizabeth and Calvin is that he loved her because he loved her mind. And he wasn't looking for, this attractive woman. He was looking for someone who understood what he was talking about for the first time in his life. And she was that person. And for her, he was that person. That they could communicate at such a high level and understand each other was such a relief. It was like coming home to someone.
Yeah. I mean, he was an introvert. He was a brilliant scientist. He was a rower, came from not a traditional family. Neither of them came from traditional families. Why did you choose to make them both sort of misfits when it came to family life?
Well, I did that for a couple reasons, but I think the biggest reason is because so many people in the world feel like they don't fit in their families. There are lots and lots of people who feel like why am I the child that stands out? Or why don't I get along with my siblings? Or why am I not the favorite? Or worse, why was I kicked out of my family? And I think one of the themes of the book is the idea that that family and found family is just as important as the family that you're born into. But being born into something doesn't necessarily mean that you belong there. And so I wanted to give people hope. If they feel like they're not in their right place or in the right family, that's not unusual. It's not abnormal. And your right family is out there somewhere, and you can go and find them and connect with them. Because the truth is, we concentrate so much on genetics and things like that. But genetics will tell you that there's no such thing. None of us, we're all the same. We are actually all 99.9% the same. There's no such thing as race in genetics. And when you marry someone, man, woman, whatever, you don't share blood with them. So when you have children, you've exchanged your chromosomes, but you're not related at all to your partner, not even a little bit, and yet that's your family. So your family can be anywhere you look for it and you choose it. And that's, I think, one of the themes I wanted to get across was that there are a lot of people who feel quite hopeless in their family. And that's only because you just need to find the right people, and those become your family, those people.
It's interesting, and rowing fits in nicely to that, because rowing, when you're a rower, you're part of that family and they all have to work together.
Yeah.
Right. Can you tell us a little bit about rowing? Because it said that you're a rower.
Yeah, it's funny because people think, oh, like you were saying, you must have a lot about, there's a lot of you in the book. Actually, there's not. The only thing about me in the book is the rowing. And I put rowing in for two reasons. One, I did not have to research it. And after researching cooking and chemistry, I needed to write about something I knew without having to look it up. But I really love rowing also because it's really one of the only sports I can think of that requires complete cooperation, silent cooperation between people in a boat at such a high level where you literally have to leave your ego on the dock and you have to decide your goal as a group is to row so well and so evenly, matching each other perfectly. So you can't have hot dogs in the boat. You can't have one person who goes, I'm going to show everybody how good I am. It won't work. That person will slow down the boat. So it's an idea of cooperation. And I wanted to juxtapose that against the typical workplace where we often don't find cooperation between teams. And we find a lot of infighting and a lot of egos that get involved.
So it's interesting because Calvin can row and other men can row and they can all get along and agree there. So maybe if they could transfer all of those skills to the workplace, life would be a lot better.
I think so. It's funny. I've talked to a lot of rowers and they all say the same thing. Yeah, if we acted the way we do in a boat at work, we would get 10 times the amount done. 10 times the amount, because the emotion goes away and the hard work stays and the cooperation stays. You agree on a goal and all 8 of you together go after it.
It seems like it must be fun.
Yeah, I love rowing, but it's actually very harsh exercise. And I love the camaraderie. I love the sound of the oars and the oar locks. I love the whole thing. But it is so funny. I was interviewed last weekend by an Olympic gold medalist rower, just a great guy. And right after he won the gold medal in Sydney, he never got in another boat again because it is that hard. You start at a starting line, you're racing, you're basically going to donate your lungs to the race. It's very painful. So a lot of people after they've rowed at that level find it impossible to just row for fun because it's work. It's work and cooperation. It's exhausting, but it's also great. I love the rowing family.
Yeah. Okay. So Calvin wants to marry Elizabeth and she doesn't want to marry him. He also wanted to help her with her career and she doesn't want help. How was that to write that relationship?
Oh, it was, part of me of course I wanted them to be married, but it was ridiculous because, Elizabeth knew that no matter what, if she married Calvin, she would never, ever get credit for her work. They would simply ascribe it to him. And that had happened 1,000 times in history. We see it all the time. And so she was adamant that no, she wanted credit for her work. And that, that meant, no, they couldn't be married, but she was going to stand by him, stay with him, but she didn't see the point of marrying him. And I think that, for her, it was hard to say no because she loved him, but he wasn't willing to give up his last name. So she wasn't going to give up hers. And you know what? That's even and that's fair.
Right. I know when I read it, I wanted her to just say yes. Just say yes. I knew that she shouldn't, but I really wanted her to. So it was a great scene to read.
Thank you.
Like that. When he dies, Elizabeth is tested emotionally. and she has a very hard time, and then she finds out she's pregnant. How was it to write that? And did you know how she was going to react, or did you have to revise that?
Oh, I rewrite everything 1,000 times, but no, I knew she'd be absolutely devastated. When you find your soulmate, the only person who's ever gotten you, and suddenly he's gone, I mean, she was just, it killed her, you know? And I think that she would not have been able to survive without the help of her dog. She needed companionship, and she needed to have responsibility for another living being. And then of course she's pregnant, so she has that too. And she does not want to be pregnant because she never wanted to be a mother. So she's had these decisions taken away from her. And I think having her cope with that and deciding how she was going to get through this, her resilience was something I really wanted to bring out in the book. How do you cope with the unthinkable?
It's not that fair. Women seem to be faced with, you know, these things that happen to them, decisions that they didn't make, a lot more often than men.
Exactly. Yeah, I think the women still, you know, they still handle most of the emotional labor in the world, not to mention most of the housework and child raising in the world. And then they're also working. So if the floor drops out from under you and you're maintaining all these other balls in the air, how much can you maintain and keep your sanity? I think, you know, for her, I think she, you know, she didn't think that she would make it. It was really tough for her. But she, you know, she perseveres because she kind of has to.
Right. So let's talk about her dog, 630, or their dog. Tell us about the name, of course, and then also about the name of your dog, which is 99, which both strange names for a dog. So let's hear it.
Okay. Well, 630 came to me, the name came to me simply the way he describes it in the book, that, you know, there was a misunderstanding, and she thought Calvin was asking her what time it was, and he was asking her, who's that? And she said 630, and they just stuck with the name. But then 630 believes that's how you name things, that, you know, when a family member enters your life, they get a number for the time that you meet them. And so he believes that must be how it works. But so that's how his name came about. And 630 came before 99. My dog 99 actually has nothing to do with the book or anything. My dog 99 was named after a friend of mine who died. And when we were kids, we always called ourselves 86 and 99 from the show Get Smart. And when she died, it was really sad for me. And I took her name out of retirement. And when we got another dog, I named her 99 after my friend. And, you know, at the time, I never thought about 630. I'd already written the book, and I was almost done with the book at that time. It never occurred to me that they were both number names. I mean, isn't that bizarre? But then I thought later, somebody said, oh, they must be related. And I said, you know, they're not, but no, that's just what happened. But 630, he was based on my dog Friday. And that's the only living being in the book who's based on somebody real.
So your dog was named Friday. That's weird too. Date. I mean, you know, it's a theme that you didn't even know about.
My kids named our dog Friday because we adopted her from a shelter on Saturday, and for some reason they thought it was Friday, and they called her Friday.
Very funny.
Yeah.
I think Bonnie, you're muted too.
Okay.
All right, that's good. No, you're muted again.
Okay, now I'm unmuted.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
So 630 has learned language and is a very smart dog. And I know my dog is smart. He knows a lot of words when I talk to him, although he's old, he can't hear that well. So now I'm into sign language, but he understands hand signals. He does puzzles. He's brilliant, you know.
Wow.
Like your dog, I'm sure. Why did you include the dog's perspective in this book?
Well, it was not intentional. Because when I was writing it, the first time the dog had thoughts, I thought, oh, no, 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 no. It's kind of magical realism. This is a shaky road to go down. And then as I kept writing, he kept having more things to say. And I realized I needed this perspective from the other side of the animal kingdom to round out Elizabeth Zott, but also to comment on us and the dumb decisions we make every day. I thought it would be really great, because Elizabeth is a scientist, to have an anthropologist commenting on us. And the anthropologist is, of course, 630, because we don't really know what dogs are thinking of us. They certainly have opinions about us. They have ideas about us, as do all animals in the animal kingdom. But as people, we define intelligence only by human terms. I'm not really sure why we do that. It's mainly because we don't know very much about how other animals think and what their processes are. But the octopus has 9 brains. We have 1. So maybe we should be studying this a little bit more, because we're really the only species that's ruining the planet.
Yeah, it's so interesting to have the dog's perspective, because had it been a man making the commentary, that would have a different meaning. Or if it were a woman, it would have different meaning. So really, yes, having the dog is kind of that neutral figure, and he can say whatever he wants and we can, yes, take it in a different way. So
right.
It is nice to have that character. And of course, it's always read about a dog. So I love that character so much. I see other people also are saying. Okay, so let's talk about Madeline. She is also extremely smart, like the dog, and like Elizabeth, and like the Calvin, the father. Everyone's very bright in the family. And she knows that she has to fit in at school. So she takes the notes out of her lunchbox at 5 years old, when most kids can't even read. She reads them at home, and then she stores them in a box, and she goes to school and she shares her lunch, and she's giving away all of her food. Tell us about Maddie and how she came about.
Well, that book had started a long time ago. She was an adult in that book. She was the main protagonist. So I only wrote half of that book, and then I shelved it. It just wasn't working. But writing her as an adult meant that I knew who she was as a child. And so when I sat down to write Mad, I just thought, what if you were a child who was raised by someone like Elizabeth Zott, who has no limits? She does not impose any kind of limitations on her child whatsoever. What would it be like to be raised by someone like that? And how would you turn out? And so that was the inspiration for her, because I thought, it'd be really interesting. I remember when my daughter, one of my kids, was really young in the library, and told her that she couldn't read one of the books that she wanted to check out. She said, "You're not old enough to read it." And she said, "Well, no, I am. And she said, "No, you have to be 8 years old, or 10 years old or whatever to read this." And I remember hearing that conversation and thinking, we're not cookie cutter people. Even if it was beyond my daughter's comprehension, to tell her that she wasn't capable of attempting that was not a smart thing to do. So that's why I decided to allow Mad to be raised by a woman who maybe takes it too far, but then has help in the form of Harriet and a dog to make sure the child is safe during Elizabeth's experiments and her kind of free-form parenting.
Right. And now what about Harriet? So she was very supportive. She was really the only close friend that Elizabeth had. Why was it important for you to give Elizabeth this female friend?
Well, Elizabeth, she didn't want to be married. She didn't want to be a mother. And I think she kind of looked down, frankly, on women who were at home. And she really couldn't understand why you would do that when you have a brain and you're capable of doing all this other more interesting stuff. And so for her to suddenly be in that role and have to discover how hard it is to be that woman at home I wanted Harriet to be that counterpoint to her and, be the wiser one in a lot of ways and have to teach her what she needed to know in order to survive motherhood. Because I think Elizabeth had some dumb ideas about motherhood. For instance, she thought she could put the baby on a schedule. And we all know that it's a nice idea, but it probably won't work. And I think, for her, she suddenly realized that she needed to respect these women. And that's how she was able to do the show, because she realized, wow, I'm one of them. And I didn't vote to be in that camp. And I'm betting a lot of those other women didn't make that vote either. It wasn't their decision either. And so that kind of brings it full circle. But Harriet is the one who teaches her what she needs to be doing.
Maybe if Elizabeth had had a mother that was attentive, she wouldn't have needed that friendship so much. But Harriet sort of took the place of her mother in some ways.
Yeah.
And then what about Walter? So Elizabeth's producer at Supper at 6 was Walter, and he was her male friend. And why was that important?
Well, in the book, we have some really horrible male characters, but we also have a lot of really good men. We have Calvin, Walter Pine, Dr. Mason, Wakely. These men are all allies. These men are all really quality people. And I loved Walter because he is in this really difficult position as a man who doesn't want to be an asshole at work, but that's kind of the role he's expected to play as the producer. And it doesn't fit his personality. And so he meets Elizabeth Zott and he realizes that she is really different and really special. And despite the fact that it's going to ruin his life, he allows her to keep going and having this show because he shows true respect for her. He's a little bit wishing that she would scale things back a little, but she doesn't. And he knows that, in his heart, he respects her for it. So I wanted the series of men who are very respectful towards women and understand what they're capable of. But Walter had to take the brunt of Elizabeth's, decisions to do things her way.
Right. So after reading this book, what is your hope that people walk away with? What message do you want people to get from the book?
I think, right now, the world's very irrational. We're all faced with fake news all the time, a lot of irrationality on the news, and things just don't add up. And Elizabeth Zott is a rationalist. And I guess for me, I think I'd like to see rationalism make a comeback. But in order to do that, we have to change. And I think it is very hard to make change. We have an idea that it's hard, but the fact is it's not as hard as we make it out to be, because we are all of us, just atoms and molecules. We are absolutely designed to change every day. Our brain makes huge leaps and changes every day. And so all we really have to do is be perhaps a little more self-critical, decide what you need to change within yourself, whether it's speaking up more at work, or saying no to the right people, or whatever it is that you decide that you want to do. Now's the time to do it. Change is not that hard. It is what we are chemically designed to do.
I wonder, do you do any book groups with just men in this book? Have you done?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I have. and it's been fascinating. It's been a hard sell with the cover in the US because it looks like a rom-com book. So a lot of men don't pick it up, but a lot of women give the book to their husband to read. And so I have done a couple of book groups like that. And it's just been great. I mean, especially men who have daughters who are suddenly going, oh my God, I don't want my daughter treated like this. But they also sort of see themselves, I think, in a way that they hadn't. There's a little bit of discomfort sometimes. And then there was the guy who said, I'm on the road to reformation. I was Donati. And now I can see myself. So you get all kinds of reactions. I've had a few men say, I don't think it's that bad. And as soon as they say that, the other men in the room go, you're part of the problem.
Well, that's good. They're calling each other out. That's
exactly.
Let them fight it out.
We do have a few members who have passed the book on to their husbands as well. So that's good.
Oh, good. Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Maybe we can bring the husbands back and do another talk with you.
There you go.
From this group.
Is there a chance that the paperback cover will look drastically different and maybe have a different kind of feel? Or do you have any say in that?
You know, you do get to have a vote, but you don't get the final vote. And I don't think I should have the final vote because they're the publisher and they know, I think that they know more than I do. But I think with their cover, they made, I think, a misstep with that one because it's raised a lot of, I mean, a lot of people who want to read a romance and don't want to read, you know, a political book. They open them and they go, well, now I'm mad because I don't want to read something like this. And I understand that completely. So I think the paperback cover will be different. But I don't know what it will be, and I'm not sure when it will be. I won't be, gosh, the earliest would be March, but I'm not even sure when, if that's true. So we'll just wait and see. But I think that they're open to definitely changing the feel of it, but we'll just see what it is.
Yeah, it's funny because here, this is the cover, which everyone probably has seen. It does feel like it's going to be a light kind of read, and I think that's good for marketing because a lot of people bought it and then they didn't know what they got. But I think, based on the reaction, everyone was pretty happy with what they got. So you there. That's exciting.
Well, I will say a couple of romance readers were not happy because they really, no, she has to get married. No, she has to have, she has to end up with a man at the end. No, I mean, it was like, no, they did not want to read. So that, over and over, I think the biggest comment I've gotten on the America cover was, I've been misled. And it does mean more men won't read the book based on the cover because it doesn't look serious. And yet the book does tackle pretty serious issues. But I think either way, people are picking it up and reading it. And like, you were saying, you might give it to your husband. My husband gives it to every man on the street. It's great. So I think, it can work both ways and we'll just wait it out and see.
Now, the line that you have in the book, children, set the table. Your mother needs a moment to herself. Where did that come from? I mean, that's a genius line. I love that. And I've seen people writing it like in their reviews. Everyone has that line everywhere.
I don't know. I mean, I'm a copywriter. I think that's what copywriters write. I don't know, it just seemed like something she would say. My idea with that was that Elizabeth Zott would assume, because she's Elizabeth Zott, that the children would be watching the show with their mother. And with that line, she's trying to teach them that their mother is worthy of respect. And so she's training the next generation to understand that a woman is an important person in the world. And that's really why I wanted it there. And it's funny. I mean, I don't think I've ever tried that line on my kids. I'm going to try it now.
Yeah, I like that. I know my kids are too old now. I missed my opportunity.
I know, me too. So,
and the title of the book, was this always the title? And how'd you come up with it?
No, the title was Introduction to Chemistry. And the night before Frankfurt, my lovely agent called me in a panic and said, the book is slotting into nonfiction in the computers because of the title. And we were worried about that. But when it actually happened, we had a panic attack. And she goes, how about if we call it Lessons in Chemistry? And I said, great. And then poof, it was in the computer and that was it.
Wow. So it just happened quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it was the final hour. We had less than 30 minutes to come up with a title.
Well, but you're a copywriter, so you can work under pressure. No
I know, I couldn't name my own book. And so when she said that, I said, okay, that's great. I love my agent. Yeah.
Yeah, you lucked out. What are you working on now? Do you have a new project?
Yeah, I'm working on a new novel. It's not related to this one, and I really like it. I tell you more about it, but I made this huge change to the protagonist a couple weeks back, and it's really turned the whole book upside down, but I think in a good way. So I'm working away on that.
Okay. I just want to say to everyone, if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. And then I just have one last question, really, which is, what do you read in your free time? And what have you read lately? Can you recommend anything to us?
Well, I don't know how popular Rachel Joyce is in the United States. She's a British writer. She wrote, maybe you've read The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry. And then she wrote the next book in this. she wrote 2 sequels. The next one was Queenie, something like that. But the third one, and it was good. The third one is called Maureen Fry and the Angel of the North. And I highly triple recommend this book. Rachel Joyce is an incredible writer. She writes about people with such empathy and depth and with such clarity. I love her writing. They're making a movie out of the Harold Fry book, but I just finished reading Maureen, and it will be out in a couple weeks. You don't even have to read the other 2, although you should. It's only 150 pages. You'll read it in one day, and it will just stay with you forever.
That new one, the Maureen Fry book, I do not think it's available in the US yet.
Yeah, I think it hasn't even come out here. I blurbed it. I was just so taken with it.
It comes out
I
this
think it
month.
comes.
This
Yeah,
month.
it's out in October. Yeah, yeah.
But I did read Rachel Joyce's book called The Music Shop, which I highly recommend. I loved it. I believe it takes place in maybe the 1980s, and it's all about music and a relationship, and it was a joy. I loved it so much. So I'm excited to look at these others written.
Well, I'm so glad that you know of her, because I keep talking to people who've never heard of her. I'm sort of shocked because she's really big here, of course, but she's also just an amazing person. So thrilled to hear it.
Somebody said they also enjoyed her book, Miss Benson's Beetle.
Yeah, yeah.
And then we had a question, Bonnie. Can you talk about tone, voice, and the use of humor in lessons in chemistry?
Well, in terms of, I got some really good writing advice a long time ago from another writer. Her name is Laura Koshinsky. And she told me, she was reading something of mine. She said, you write humor pretty well, but you need to balance it. And I said, okay, what are you talking about? And she said, there's this word called duende. And if you can pull this off, if you can put dark with light, you'll go a little further. You'll have more depth to your story. And that advice has stuck with me. I heard it at least 15 years ago, and it stuck with me. And I employed it even in copywriting, because anything that you want to do has a serious side to it. Life just is a lot harder than it's sometimes even fun to talk about, but everybody's going through something. And so when you acknowledge that in your writing, but then you pair it with humor, so they're not dragged down to the depths, then you can really, I think, make a difference in terms of getting people to keep reading. And so the humor, I don't know, you know what, honestly, I don't find what I write funny. And so I always test it out on my husband, who finds nothing funny. And if he smiles a little bit, then I know it's hilarious. So that is my gold standard of, is this funny or not?
And the next question is, can you talk a bit more about the process of writing and getting published?
Yeah, no, it was so exciting. I think I, pretty much grabbed the brass ring here. Like I said, my agent is Felicity Blunt. You would know her sister, who is Emily Blunt. And she is this, really great agent who really, she puts her heart and soul into all of her authors. And sometimes it pays off and sometimes it doesn't. But she gave me some ideas for what she wanted me to do. And the great thing about her and I is that I'm not the kind, I've been writing too long, so I'm not, I don't go, no, I won't take all of her suggestions. I'll say, I'll do this, but absolutely not this. And then she'd say, no, you have to do that. And I'd say, no, I'm not going to do that. And the thing is that we have so much respect, I think, for each other, that if I'm pushing back or she's pushing on me, it's for a good reason. And we listen to each other at that point. And so when she decided to take the book to Frankfurt, we expected absolutely nothing. We thought maybe it would sell, but maybe it wouldn't, because we know a lot of people, their books go to Frankfurt, they don't sell to a single publisher. You get 25 rejections. It's very disheartening. But within 24 hours, she called me up and she said, wow, forget it. I cannot believe this. We've got 25 offers on the table. And it just kept escalating. So we sold it to the UK first, and then the US auction started a week later, and then Hollywood got involved a week after that. And then the countries just started, Germany, bam, and Scandinavia, bam, and China, and everybody's just like, pfft. So we were all shocked because do you guys think it's a very American book? I think it's a very American book. But I was on a Zoom with Korea the other night, and they said, this book is so Korean. And I keep hearing that from other nations. So obviously there's a lot we all have in common all over the world.
Yeah. You brought something up that also Hollywood. So you've been optioned to do an Apple TV show. Do you have a say in how that goes? Are you part of that creative process, or?
I wanted to be, but I'm so naive. I didn't know, especially with so many territories, that I would have so much work to do to promote the book. And I do a lot of work for that every single day. And I've been doing it for pre-pub too. And so they said, you're not going to have time to work on the script. And you know what? You will be better off if you just go here, take the book, and then you walk away. And that was probably the best advice I could have ever been given. Because what Hollywood does is they're great, but they get free license to make big changes and do all sorts of things. And they have to do that because the book isn't written in episodic form. And so they have to recraft it into 8 episodes that are exactly 50 minutes long and have a plot line that makes sense. And as a writer, it's really hard to see your child torn apart, but I can just sit back. And I love the writer who's working on it. It's just one person right now, and he and I get along really well. He wrote several episodes of The Office, and I just got email from him saying, I'm sending you scripts 5 and 6, so I want to hear what you think. He and I are both like, oh, and yeah, and it's different, but I really like him. I respect him. I'm co-executive producer, which means I do, literally this job description means do nothing. So I just sit back and they're shooting, and it will be on Apple TV probably late summer, early fall 2023.
And who's playing Elizabeth?
Brie Larson.
Did you get that connection to this writer through your agent?
No. So what happens is all these studios came in. There were 38 studios who made a bid on the book. This is before we even found an American publisher. I just couldn't believe it. And then from there, we narrowed it down to a must produce option because most options never get made. I didn't know that. You can have your book option 98% of the time. It will never go any further than that. They just take it off the market for 3 years and that's it. You get a small sum of money. And my film agent said, we're going to go for must produce. That means that they absolutely have to commit to making this. And then once everyone heard that, we were down to 8 studios. And but that was fun. I interviewed 8 different studios and all on Zoom. And you see all these really, really famous people who you've only ever seen on the red carpet talking to you about your book and talking about how they're going to either make it into a movie or a limited series or an ongoing series. And every single person had a different vision for how they were going to do it. So one night I was talking to all the Mad Men people, another night I was talking to all the Games of Thrones people. It just went like that. And then one night I talked to Aggregate Films, and that's Jason Bateman and Michael Costigan. And Brie Larson had called me on Zoom, just herself, and she said, I want to be the producer of this book, and I want to be Elizabeth Zott. And we had a long talk about it. She was so great. She's very normal. And I said, aren't you kind of busy? And she goes, no, not really. Anyway, so she said, I'm going to attach myself to this. If I attach myself to this, then we will get a really good deal streaming. It really helps because even if you have a studio, you have to have a streaming company pick it up. And if you have an Oscar-winning actress attached, your chances of getting picked up suddenly zoom way up. And so for her to say, I'm putting my money where my mouth is, and I'm executive producer too, was like, oh, okay. It was just bizarre, to be honest. So she signed on, and then they went to all the streaming places and did a presentation. And then we ended up with Apple TV, and they are just the best. Although I didn't get a free subscription like I thought I would. So yeah, but anyway, they've been fantastic. So it'll be quite different from the book, but you know what? I don't care. They've been so great to work with. It's fine.
It'll be fun for you to watch, to see how somebody else interpreted your characters.
Well, you know, it's so funny. My agent is married to Stanley Tucci. I was lucky enough to be at their house the other night. And he said to me, he goes, how's the book tour going? And I said, how's your book tour going? He goes, oh, it's awful. And I said, I know. And he said, are you able to read? Are you able to look at your book? And I said, no, I can't. I hate it. I can't open it. It's bad. And I said, are you able to watch yourself in any of the movies? And he said, oh, God, no. Actors don't, we never watch ourselves. We never watch ourselves. And I said, he goes, when your series comes out, you're going to be sitting on the sofa with a pillow over your face. It's going to be so hard for you to watch. That made me feel very reassured.
Wow. So you really lucked out with your agent, brought you into a whole new world. You were a copywriter, and now you're hobnobbing with all kinds of people.
Well, you know, it's great. It's really great, but it's really bad for the rest of her writers. You know, she has a lot of other writers too who have written books, and some of them aren't doing very well. Even Stanley said, you're outselling me. And she's my agent too. And I said, well, you wrote a cookbook, you know, you wrote a memoir. Anyway, he was really great. But no, she's incredible. But I have an agent in New York as well. And then they also give you a film agent. It's ridiculous. There are a lot of people that come together to make this a reality. Felicity, what she does is she negotiated the first deal. And that was with my UK publisher, but that's the end of it. She doesn't do the US deals. She doesn't do Hollywood. None of that. That's not her purview.
Wow. Well, it's pretty fantastic. I'm excited for you. It's
thank you.
A whole new world to learn about, right?
Yes. It is, but it's been great. It's been great. It's hard, but it's been great. So, but I really appreciate you guys inviting me tonight. It's really nice.
Thank you so much for coming. I think everybody on here loved the book, loved all the characters. There's all kinds of nice comments that we'll scroll through.
Yeah.
In fact, I'll get a copy of this so I can send you some of the comments so you can see what people wrote, because a lot of people wrote some nice things.
Yeah, no, that's so great. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for being here. We had a nice big crowd. It was really great for you to come out on this rainy day or chilly night if you're in London. And so thanks very much for being here. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
We'll look forward to having you back for your next book.
Okay, great.
Thanks,
right.
everybody.
Take care now.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye now.